On April 3rd, something shifts. Saturn, the planet of structure, discipline, and the deepest reckoning you will ever face with yourself, makes an exact square to the lunar nodes. This is not a minor transit tucked between more colorful events. This is a test, a real one. And it has been building for months, moving slowly the way Saturn always moves, laying the groundwork for an examination of your life that you did not ask for, but that some part of you has been preparing for since the start of this year. April 3rd is the peak. But what you have been feeling, the weight of it, the pressure of it, the particular kind of tired that has no obvious cause, that started weeks ago, maybe longer. And if you have been waking up in the night, somewhere between 2 and 4 a.m., with a low-grade awareness that feels both specific and nameless, that is Saturn. It has been working on you from the inside, the way a question works on you, long before you have the words to ask it out loud. There is something this transit is asking you to see about yourself that you have been expertly not seeing for a very long time. A pattern, a cost you have been absorbing quietly, a version of your life that no longer fits, even though you have made it fit through sheer force of discipline and will. Here is what I want to tell you before we go deeper. What is cracking right now is not your foundation. It is the wall you built around it. And the difference between those two things is everything. Stay with me, because by the end of what I am about to share with you, that distinction will feel less like a reassurance and more like something you already knew and had simply forgotten. Welcome to April 3rd. You arrived here for a reason. Thousands of people are watching this in the same window of days. Some of you found it this morning before the world fully woke up. Some of you found it late at night when the quiet finally made the feeling impossible to ignore. Wherever you are right now, whatever brought you here, you are not alone in what you are carrying. The same planetary pressure that is working on you is working on everyone watching this. That is the quiet truth of astrology that nobody says out loud enough. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are on time, and you are in company. If this lands for you, please subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Leave a like if you came here looking for something real. And in the comments, I want you to write this: I am ready to stop managing what I need to release. Write it even if you are not sure you mean it yet. Sometimes the declaration comes before the readiness. That is allowed. Now let us go somewhere real. Let us begin with what you have been feeling in your body before we talk about anything else. Because the body is where Saturn always announces itself first. The mind can rationalize. The body simply registers. Something has been sitting in your chest. Not pain exactly, so more like pressure. Like your ribcage is housing a question it does not have room to contain. It arrives without warning, usually in quiet moments. The drive home, the shower, the first few minutes after waking before the day's agenda rushes in to fill the space. You are not in crisis. From the outside, your life probably looks mostly intact, but from the inside, there is this weight. This sense that something needs to be resolved that you do not yet know how to resolve. And the strangest part of it is that it has no obvious cause. Nothing catastrophic happened. Nothing collapsed, which almost makes it worse because your mind keeps scanning for the source and coming up empty, and the pressure remains regardless. Your sleep has changed. You may be sleeping more than usual. A heaviness that pulls you under earlier than you expect. A quality of exhaustion that a full night does nothing to fully relieve. Or you may have found yourself surfacing at 3 a.m. with a precision that feels almost deliberate, as though something in you scheduled this waking for this specific hour. The quality of thought at that hour is different from ordinary worry. It is not frantic, it is audit-like. You find yourself taking stock of things you do not normally examine in the daylight. The balance sheets of your life, where you gave and where you received, what you built that reflects you, and what you built for other people's approval. What you have been calling contentment that might more honestly be called managed acceptance. Saturn does its most important work in the night hours. It counts things, and it presents you with the count. The dreams, if you have been remembering them, have a particular quality. Old places, people from the past, not people you have been consciously thinking about, but people from the earlier chapters of your life, when your direction was still unwritten. Old versions of yourself in familiar settings, the house you grew up in, the neighborhood you left, the job or relationship or context that shaped you before you had the vocabulary for what was shaping you. These are not random. Dreams under Saturn's pressure are the psyche performing its own inventory. They are showing you what you put in storage, what has been waiting. Your tolerance has changed in ways that are specific and worth naming. Things that used to roll off you. A certain kind of social performance that requires you to be cheerful and available when you are neither. A dynamic in a relationship that you have navigated around for years with a kind of habitual grace. A compromise you made so long ago that you almost forgot it was a compromise. They are not rolling off anymore. They are sticking. They are irritating in a way you cannot quite explain because nothing new has changed. No new offense has occurred. Except something has changed. You have. Something in you has run out of the particular energy it takes to maintain the management around something that deserves to be addressed. There is a specific quality to this depletion. It is not burnout in the general sense. You have probably experienced burnout before, and this is different. Burnout is the result of overextension. What you are feeling now is more like the result of a kind of inner compression, as though you have been holding yourself at a smaller size than you actually are, for longer than you can now sustain, and the holding has become more costly than the size reduction was worth. The thing pressing outward is not just fatigue, it is dimension. It is the full-sized version of yourself that has been contained in a container that once fit and now does not. The relational dimension of this has its own texture. You may have found that certain conversations feel more effortful than usual, not because the relationships have changed, but because you are less able to be the version of yourself that has been showing up in them. The accommodating version, the stable anchor, the one who notices when someone else needs something and provides it before they have to ask, the one who smooths friction and maintains equilibrium and keeps the emotional temperature of the room at a level that feels manageable for everyone. That capacity has thinned, and you are not sure if that is something wrong with you or something that has finally become honest. I will tell you now it is the second one, but that does not make it easy to inhabit, especially when people around you have organized their expectations around the version of you that was always available. What you may be noticing in relationships is a specific new sensitivity to reciprocity, not a calculated resentment, more like a heightened awareness of the direction of energy flow, where you give and where it returns, where you reach out and find the same warmth reaching back, where you extend yourself and realize, with a clarity that is both useful and uncomfortable, that the extension is not being received the way you need it to be received. This is not about other people suddenly behaving badly. It is about you becoming less able to accept an imbalance that you have been absorbing without complaint for longer than you realized. Saturn is asking for honesty about what is sustainable and what has simply been managed. There is also something happening around decisions, specifically around decisions you have been deferring. You know the ones. The professional direction that has been tugging at you but feels too uncertain to move toward. The conversation about money, your own, your worth, how you have been pricing what you offer or accepting what others decide your time is worth. That has been sitting on the back shelf because it requires an uncomfortable reckoning with your own value. The personal decision that affects another person may be someone you love, which means the cost of making it is not only your own to absorb. Saturn does not respect perpetual deferral. It applies pressure to unresolved things until they become impossible to continue avoiding. If you have been feeling like the option of waiting is narrowing, if the question is starting to feel urgent in a way it did not feel 6 months ago, that is exactly what is happening, and it is happening on schedule. There is something underneath all of these experiences that connects them, the fatigue and the 3 a.m. wakefulness, the relational friction and the decision deferral, the body pressure and the dwindling tolerance, the dreams of old places and the strange new irritability toward old patterns. They are all pointing at the same thing, a misalignment between who you are now and the shape of the life you are currently living. Not a failure, a growth. You have outgrown something significant, and the friction you are feeling is the outgrowing. The transit peaking on April 3rd is the reason it is cresting right now in this exact window of days, with this exact intensity. Let me tell you what is happening in the sky. Saturn sits at 9 degrees of Aries right now. That alone is significant. Saturn entered Aries for the first time in nearly 30 years at the very start of 2025, and what it brought with it was a fundamentally different quality of reckoning than the previous period in Pisces. Aries is the sign of the self, not the social self, not the relational self, not the professional self, but the primal self. The self that existed before all the roles you fill were assigned to you. The self that has desires that are its own, rather than derivatives of what people needed you to be. Saturn in Pisces, where it spent the previous 3 years, asked about dissolution, about surrender, about the places where you had been holding too tightly to certainty and needed to let the boundary soften. It was a searching transit, an inward transit, a transit that required a certain willingness to not know. Many of you spent those 3 years in a productive confusion, a necessary unknowing that was uncomfortable, but that cleared out things that needed clearing. Saturn in Aries does something different. It asks about construction, about identity, about the structure of the self that remains after all the surrendering and dissolving. What is left, what is real, what is yours, and not borrowed or imposed. And it asks these questions not with Pisces' gentle dissolution, but with Aries' direct and sometimes brutal precision. It asks with a scalpel, not an ocean. At 9 degrees, Saturn is activating a Sabian symbol that carries a specific instruction. The demand for sincere expression, not performance, not the organized, carefully managed expression of a self that has been curated for acceptability. The direct, unmediated expression of what is actually true. Saturn in Aries at this degree is asking you to stop using sophistication as a substitute for honesty. It is asking you to say the thing that is actually true before you have made it palatable, before you have surrounded it with enough context to soften the potential impact, before you have assessed how it will land. This is genuinely difficult for the people in this audience, and I want to acknowledge that without softening it. You are not unaware of your own truth. You are highly articulate about your interior life. The issue is not knowledge, it is expression. The gap for you is between what you know and what you allow to take up real space in your relationships and your choices. Saturn at this degree is targeting precisely that gap. The lunar nodes complete the picture. When Saturn squares the nodes, the North Node in Cancer and the South Node in Capricorn right now, it creates what astrologers call a skipped step, a karmic crossroads. The South Node in Capricorn represents the accumulated patterns of achievement orientation, the earned competence, the disciplined responsibility-taking, the identity organized around functioning well and producing tangible results. For many of you, these capacities are genuinely your strengths. You have built real things. You have honored real commitments. You are not people who retreat from difficulty. But the South Node, over time, becomes a refuge as much as a skill. When the going gets uncertain, you go back to what you know, back to the reliability, back to the competence, back to the organized execution of the known agenda, and in doing so you avoid the North Node, which for the Cancer North Node is asking for something much more vulnerable. The capacity to need, to be received, to organize your life around nourishment rather than around output, to let yourself be held rather than always being the one doing the holding. Saturn squaring these nodes on April 3rd is saying you cannot stay in the South Node comfort anymore. The North Node direction is not optional at this moment, and the specific quality of growth being called for is not strategic or productive or organized. It is the growth that comes from allowing yourself to be genuinely vulnerable in a way that does not immediately transform the vulnerability into a task to be managed. Think of it in terms of the wall. You built the wall stone by stone over decades. Each stone is a commitment, a responsibility, a role, a structure you erected to keep things safe and functioning. The wall is real. The work that went into it is real. But now some of the stones in the wall are also blocking the light. And the question Saturn is asking is not whether to knock the wall down. The question is which stones were placed there from genuine necessity, and which ones were placed there from fear, from the need to control outcomes, from the belief, absorbed early before you had the context to question it, that if you did not hold everything together, everything would fall apart. Some of those stones belong where they are. Others have been serving a function that was real once and is no longer real now. Saturn is asking you to identify which is which, not to destroy what you have built, to make the wall something that serves life rather than containing it. Now let us go into what this actually means for the journey you are on right now, not abstractly, in the real texture of a life being lived at this specific moment, at this specific age, in these specific circumstances. Something is cracking open in you. I want to be precise about what that means, because the word cracking carries fear for a person who has spent decades building genuine stability. You have worked hard for what you have. You have earned your ground. The last thing you want is to crack it open and watch the work of decades scatter. That is not what is happening. Here is what is actually happening. Inside the structure you built, inside the life you organized and maintained and kept functioning, you have been growing, quietly, without announcing it, without disrupting anything. You have become more yourself, more knowing, more capable of naming what you actually need, what you actually value, what you are no longer willing to trade away for safety or approval, or the maintenance of a relationship or situation that asks more from you than it returns. You have been growing inside the structure the way a tree grows inside a container. For a long time, the container was the right size. It supported you. It gave your roots something to push against. And then it was not. And the cracking you feel right now is not the tree dying. It is the root system finally pressing against walls it has outgrown. The tree is the healthiest it has ever been. The container is the thing that needs to change. What is surfacing right now is old. Older than this year, older than the last several years. For some of you, it is older than a decade. There is a version of yourself that you set aside at a specific point in your life. Maybe in your 30s, maybe even earlier. Maybe when a particular loss or demand required you to reorganize your priorities rapidly, and you tucked something of yourself away temporarily. And then time passed and the temporary became permanent through inattention. You stopped noticing the absence, because you got very competent at filling your days with things that mattered and that needed you. But the thing you set aside did not dissolve. It waited. Saturn squaring the nodes is a recovery operation. It is bringing that buried self back up to the surface, not to destabilize you, but because the time has finally come when you are equipped to receive what that version of yourself was carrying. And what was it carrying? For some of you, it is a desire, a creative ambition, a direction you once felt clearly and then set aside because it felt impractical, because someone important to you was skeptical, because life required the ground to be stable, and dreaming felt like a luxury you could not afford to indulge. For others, it is a grief that never fully ran its course. Say a loss that got managed rather than felt, packed down into something functional, something you carry quietly without complaint, something you have gotten so good at not showing that you sometimes forget it is there, until it surfaces in the night, until a piece of music floods you unexpectedly, until a conversation with someone you love produces more feeling than the conversation seems to warrant, and you find yourself blinking at your own interior and wondering where all of that came from. That is the old material moving. Saturn is giving it space, and the recovery, when it comes, is not the dramatic rupture people fear. It is quieter than that, and more lasting. It is the moment you stop pretending that what you buried does not exist, and instead let it exist inside you without immediately managing it into something more acceptable. There is a pattern underneath all of this, a specific structural pattern that has run through your relationships and your choices and your relationship to yourself for most of your adult life. I want to name it carefully because I want you to recognize it rather than defend against it. The pattern is this: you are very, very good at making yourself reliable, at being the stable one, at managing your needs in a way that minimizes disruption to the people and systems around you. And there is genuine nobility in this. There is real love in it, real service, real competence. You have kept things functioning through sheer force of your own consistency. People have depended on you, and you have delivered. You are proud of this in the way only someone who has earned it through genuine sacrifice can be. But the cost has been a systematic discounting of your own full-sized needs, not in every area. You are not without self-knowledge or self-care, but in specific, important places, the places where what you need would require something from other people, would inconvenience them, would require renegotiating an arrangement they have gotten comfortable with. Those places you have quietly, expertly managed. You learned, through specific experiences in your specific history, that the full-sized version of what you need is risky to express, too demanding, too likely to be refused or to strain something that you value more than the need itself. So you edited it down. You became the person who does not ask for much, and you built your identity around that restraint, and you called it strength when sometimes it was also fear. Saturn squaring the nodes in this configuration is pointing at that editing. It is asking what it has cost you. Not as a judgment. Saturn does not judge. It inventories. The inventory is of your own energy. How much of it has gone toward managing your needs into invisibility? How much capacity you have spent on maintaining the performance of needlessness? And what would be available to you, to your actual creative and relational life, if you stopped performing it? This is the crossroads. The south node direction is the habitual compression, the reliable self-management, the known path of showing up as the dependable one and expecting nothing in return. The north node direction, the Cancer direction, the direction of nourishment and emotional reciprocity, is the full-sized arrival of your own actual needs and your actual nature, which will require things to rearrange. Some things that rearrange will feel like loss, even when they are clarification. Some relationships will need renegotiating. Some structures will need to change shape. Saturn is not apologizing for this. It is pointing at the crossroads and naming which path has been yours and which path has been the detour. You are in between right now. You are not who you were. You are not yet who you are becoming. You are in the space that has no clean name, too honest to go back, not yet arrived enough to move forward with certainty. I need to stay here with you for a moment because it is the hardest part of this transit, and it is where most people rush, and rushing it is a mistake. The in-between is not a failure state. It is not evidence that you are lost or behind or that the process is going wrong. It is the necessary space between the old container and the new shape. You are reorganizing around a deeper truth than the one that has been running your life. And this reorganization does not happen in a weekend. It does not happen because you set an intention or make a list or have a transformative conversation and feel very clear for 3 days. It happens at the pace of genuine change, which is slower than we want and more trustworthy than we realize. For you, the in-between has a specific texture at this stage of life. Your children, if you have them, are making their own lives and needing you in fundamentally different ways than they needed you for the previous 2 decades. The role that organized much of your daily identity has shifted, not disappeared, but transformed into something less constant, less urgently required. And that space where the constant was has not yet been filled by something else. Your body is changing in ways that require renegotiation, a different relationship with sleep, with energy, with what rest actually means versus what productivity means. The metabolism of your days has shifted, and the old schedules and habits that served a different version of your life no longer serve as cleanly. Your career, the shape of how you give your work to the world, is either in a period of genuine reckoning or has recently been through one. The question of what your work is for beyond the practical sustenance it provides is present in a way it may not have been when you were younger, and the answer was simpler. Long relationships are either deepening past their early forms into something raw and more real, past the surface maintenance and into the actual conversation about who you both are now and what you actually need from each other, or they are coming to a natural reckoning point that requires a kind of honesty neither person has been willing to introduce. The in-between is Tuesday. It is the ordinary morning when you get up and do the ordinary things. And underneath the ordinary things, there is this hum, this persistent low frequency of unresolved knowing, this awareness that something is in process, even when the surface of the day looks unremarkable. The in-between does not announce itself. It is just present, quietly, in everything. What I want you to know about this space is that the disorientation you feel in it is not weakness. It is the direct experience of genuine change. People who are not actually in the process do not feel this particular quality of groundlessness. They feel comfortable or they feel stuck, but they do not feel this specific thing. This sense of being in motion in a direction you cannot quite name yet, in a vehicle whose controls you are still learning. The feeling is the motion, and the motion is the process working exactly as it should. Something is beginning to stabilize underneath all of this, not from the outside, not from circumstances resolving or decisions getting easier or other people suddenly changing, from the inside. I want to describe it carefully because it is new and easy to miss if you are looking for something that looks like the old kind of certainty. What is beginning to stabilize is a direction, not a destination, not a plan with milestones and benchmarks. Something quieter and more fundamental than either of those, a faint but persistent signal below the noise of the daily management about where your energy belongs right now, about what you are actually for in the broader sense, about the thing that, if you gave it more of your real attention, would generate more aliveness in you than the things currently consuming most of your days. You have caught glimpses of it already. In the moments between tasks when something else surfaces before the next task rushes in the conversations that left you feeling more full than empty, where something in you woke up and leaned forward and forgot to monitor itself. In the work, or the absence of work, or the rest that is not just recovery but genuine presence, that made you forget to check the time. The direction is in those glimpses, and it is becoming harder to rationalize away, because Saturn at this degree in Aries is in the business of making the genuine direction unmistakable. Not louder, unmistakable. The way a truth that has been present for years suddenly becomes impossible to continue not seeing, not because anything changed in the external world, but because something changed in your capacity for self-deception. And yours has almost run out. The wall has a gap in it now, not because it was knocked down, because a stone was moved. And through that gap, light is entering the interior of the structure in a way it has not entered for a long time. That is the first light of this transit. It is not spectacular. It is specific. It is the particular quality of illumination that happens when something that was in the dark is finally visible, and the visibility itself changes your relationship to it. Saturn does not deliver arrival. That is never its gift. Its gift is the unflinching clarity that makes arrival possible. And the specific clarity it is delivering right now is about the wall, about which stones to move, which structure to release, which container has outlived its function, so that what has been growing inside finally has the room it needs. Now let us talk about what to do with all of this. Not in theory, in practice, in the specific texture of the days ahead. The first invitation is this: have the conversation you have been deferring. You know which one. There is a conversation with someone in your life or with yourself about something in your life that you have been managing around for longer than it deserves, not because you are a coward, because you are a realist. You have known that having it will require something to change, and change, even necessary change, carries disruption and the possibility of loss alongside whatever it opens. But Saturn squaring the nodes removes the comfortable middle ground. The window of affordable deferral is closing. The cost of not having the conversation is now higher than the cost of having it, even accounting for the disruption. What this conversation looks like is not a confrontation and not an ultimatum. It is the simple, direct naming of what is true for you, not your interpretation of the other person's behavior, not a careful diplomatic framing designed to land without disturbing the equilibrium. The truth of your own experience, stated as simply as it can be stated, with enough trust in the relationship and in yourself to let it land without managing how it lands. The resistance that will arise will be familiar. It will say, "This is not the right time." They are going through something. The relationship can absorb the imbalance a little longer. I have managed this far. A little longer will not change anything. These are all the voice of the South Node. They are the voice of the pattern, and Saturn is asking you to recognize them as pattern rather than reason. The right time is not a future moment when circumstances are perfect. The right time is when you have the truth clearly enough to say it. You have it now. The second invitation is a daily audit of where your energy is actually going. Not a productivity audit, not an efficiency review. A reality audit conducted through the lens of attention rather than output. For 7 days beginning on April 3rd, track your energy by noticing, specifically, concretely, What you do each day that depletes you, and what you do each day that restores you. Not in the abstract sense of what is supposed to be draining or energizing, but in the actual felt sense of how you arrive at the end of each activity compared to how you arrived at its beginning. What you are looking for is the gap between what you are giving yourself credit for sustaining, the things you call productive, necessary, supportive, valuable, and the actual energy accounting of those activities. For many people who carry the Saturn South Node pattern I described, there is a class of activity that looks from the outside like giving, and that is actually a way of avoiding. It is the helping that fills the space where your own direction should go. The service that substitutes for the self-examination it would be more uncomfortable to do. The productivity that circles the outer perimeter of the life, but never goes into the interior, where the real rearranging needs to happen. The audit is not for optimization. You are not trying to cut out everything draining and fill your days with energizing things. That is not how a real life functions. You are trying to see, with more honesty than you have allowed yourself recently, where you are actually spending your most vital reserves, because what you discover there will tell you exactly where the unexamined choices are living, and those choices are precisely what this transit is asking you to look at. The resistance this practice produces is worth naming directly. You will tell yourself that you do not have time for this level of self-focus, that other people need things. That navel-gazing is a luxury you do not have, that you already know where your energy goes and the audit is unnecessary. Hear that resistance clearly. It is the same resistance that has kept the full-sized version of your needs quietly managed for years. It knows its own name when you look at it this clearly. The third invitation is to locate one structure in your life that has outlived its purpose and to tell the truth about it to yourself. Not to dismantle it, not necessarily, but to stop pretending it still serves the purpose it was built for, to stop organizing your narrative around the reasons it still makes sense, and to acknowledge privately to yourself, in the interior where Saturn always does its best work, what is true about it. This might be a professional arrangement that made sense 5 years ago and now asks more of you than it returns. A role that you took on because it was needed, or because you were the most capable person available, or because saying yes felt safer than saying no, but that has expanded beyond what you agreed to in ways you have been absorbing without acknowledgement. It might be a relational dynamic, a friendship, a family relationship, a partnership, where what is being exchanged has quietly shifted out of balance and you have been adjusting for that imbalance so automatically that you have stopped registering it as imbalance and started calling it just the way things are. Or it might be the most interior structure of all, your own relationship with your sense of what you are allowed to want. The story you have been carrying about the size of your own ambition, your own desire, your own need for recognition or for nourishment or for something that is simply and completely yours. The limitation you placed on yourself so early and so thoroughly that it stopped feeling like a limitation and started feeling like a fact. Locate the structure. Look at it without immediately explaining it. You do not need to know what to do about it in order to be honest about what it is. Saturn is asking for the honesty first. The prescription comes after, and at its own pace and yours. Those of you with significant Aries, Capricorn, and Cancer placements are moving through this transit in specific, locatable ways. If Aries is prominent in your chart, Sun, Moon, Rising, or Saturn placed there, this transit lands directly on your sense of self-determination. The question it is pressing is foundational. What does it mean to be the author of your own life, rather than its most competent manager? The cracking open here is specific. The places where your identity has been organized around what you can accomplish, rather than around who you actually are. Aries energy at its most evolved is not ambition. It is authenticity. The full, unmanaged presence of self. That is what Saturn in Aries is asking you to practice. If Capricorn is prominent, Saturn, as your ruling planet squaring the nodes, triggers a specific reckoning around legacy. Not achievement, legacy. What will remain of who you are when the productivity is stripped away? When the results are removed from the equation, what you actually built versus what you performed building? This is not a gentle question, but it is a clarifying one, and Capricorn is sturdy enough to hold it honestly. If Cancer is prominent for you, The North Node activation is speaking directly to your deep capacity for nourishment, the giving of it, and the more difficult practice, the receiving of it. Cancer is at its most evolved when it can hold its own softness without apologizing for it. This transit is asking whether you have been using the care you extend to others as a way to avoid the care you have not yet learned to extend to yourself. Let me bring you back to the beginning. You arrived here carrying something, a pressure in your chest, a thought that returned in the night, a faint but persistent awareness that something has been needing attention that you have been managing rather than addressing. That feeling was not a malfunction. It was not anxiety misfiring or your nervous system being overly sensitive. It was signal. It was Saturn working on the stone in the wall, pointing at what has outgrown its container, asking, with the particular unhurried precision of a planet that takes 30 years to circle the sun, whether the structure you have built is still the structure that serves who you actually are, not who you were when you built it, not who other people need you to be, but who you actually are right now in this actual life. You have been growing inside that structure for years, quietly, competently, without making demands that might disrupt the carefully maintained equilibrium. You have been the version of yourself that kept everything functioning, kept the people who depend on you supported, kept the walls intact, kept the production going. You have done this with genuine skill and with genuine love. The structure you built is real. The care you put into it is real. What is being asked now is not gratitude for what was built. It is a willingness to see which stones were placed in the wall from genuine necessity, and which ones were placed there because staying small felt safer than claiming the room that was actually yours. And whether you are ready, not when things settle down, not when the timing is better, but now in this window, in this specific planetary moment, to be honest about that. You stayed with this for 40 minutes. You did not leave when it became uncomfortable. And I want to say something real about that, because this audience does not need to be flattered, and you will see through anything that tries to. Staying with your own interior for 40 minutes with no reward but clarity, at this stage of life, after everything you have navigated, after all the years of managing the needs of the world around you before attending to your own, that is not nothing. It is a specific and significant act. It is exactly what Saturn in Aries respects, not the performing of growth, the actual doing of it. Leave a comment, tell me what landed, or write this, if it is true for you today: I let the old shape go. I trust what is growing. Write it as a declaration, even if you are not completely there yet, especially if you are not completely there yet. The words sometimes carry you before the certainty arrives. Please subscribe if this is the kind of depth you need in your life. What is coming through April and into May is requiring exactly this kind of honest preparation, and I will be here for it. April 3rd is not an ending. It is the first clear view of something that has been becoming true for longer than you have been willing to see it. The wall is not falling, a stone is being moved. And where that stone was, that gap, that opening, that specific place where light now enters that did not enter before, that is where the next version of you is already beginning to breathe. This is the moment. You are in it, and you are exactly ready for what it is asking.